The Chinese history of homosexuality has undergone a dramatic tragedy. In contemporary China, homosexuality wasn't decriminalized until 1997. In 2001, it was removed from being listed as a mental disease. But for centuries, China was more tolerant of same-sex love than nearly any other society, rivaled perhaps only by ancient Greece and Rome, according to Richard Berger, author behind The Red Door, Sex in China. However, he says that same-sex behavior in ancient China differs from the modern understanding of homosexuality.
While in ancient China, there's kind of an openness towards homosexuality. And how were these kind of behavior different from the modern understanding of homosexuals?
We really can't compare the homosexual activities of ancient China with what we see in the West today. Same-sex love was everywhere. It's documented. There are books written about it. The Han Emperor had a scribe who kept a book detailing the emperor's male lovers. In the West, homosexuality is what your identity is. It's who you are. In China, men were heterosexual, most of them. They had their wives and their families. Having sex with men was just something that they did. It was a sign of prestige. It was a very common practice. There were brothels, whorehouses where the men could find boys to be with. This really exploded in Beijing toward the end of the Qing dynasty. That's when we brought in the Beijing opera and all these acting groups and lots of young boys, and they would dress up in women's clothing. They would oil their skin to make their skin soft, and they would be the boys for the wealthier men, government figures.
So they were mainly just seeking pleasure or entertainment.
Yeah, and it was largely about pleasure and entertainment. Some of these boys, they called them sing-song boys, because they would sing for them and recite poetry. It wasn't just about sex. And it was a sign of prestige. The boy is always of a lower social class than the man who's paying for his services. And it was seen as a sign of your wealth that you could be seen with one of these expensive boys.
At the end of your book about the homosexuals, you seem quite optimistic about the future of homosexuality in China. Why is that?
It wasn't until the 90s that homosexuality in China really blossomed. It was in 1997 that they removed homosexuality from the list of criminal activities. It was considered hooliganism before then. Then in 2001, they removed it from the list of mental diseases. Right now we're seeing a revolution, and it can only be described as a revolution, for gay men and lesbian women. Gay bars are everywhere. Many cities have a bathhouse. There are support centers on the internet.
How important it is for Chinese to keep their family lineage, to fulfill their filial piety.
Yeah, it's tremendously important for Chinese families to see their lineage continued. I think it's foremost in every parent's mind, and the wedding of their children is the highlight of their life in many ways. Some of them spend their whole life savings on the marriage. So it remains people's primary responsibility. The sad thing is you have 50 million homosexuals in China, and 80% of those are going to get married because they believe the same thing. It would be disrespectful to their parents. You have to have a child, preferably a boy. You have to continue the family name.
And also there's a surplus of men and in China due to a lot of reasons. And what do you think of it?
Yeah, there's going to be 20 million or so bare branches. That's men without a family tree. These bare branches are going to have very limited options when it comes to sex. Probably they're going to live in what they call bachelor ghettos, where they'll all live together, no hope of finding a woman to marry. So they have two choices. They can turn to prostitution, which I believe is going to thrive like never before, or they could turn to homosexuality. I doubt we're going to see too much of a turn toward homosexuality because that's still quite stigmatized in China today. So I see the sex trade blossoming as more and more men pass into adulthood without a wife.
Another problem is that many homosexuality is somehow associated with HIV and AIDS. Yeah, and how to solve the problem.
It's a shame. homosexuals, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, they were shunned. People were afraid of them because HIV was so associated with gay sex. I have to say, Hu Jintao, Wen Jiabao, they launched several really good campaigns, and to a large extent it was successful, but still, especially in the countryside and smaller cities, there's a lot of stigmatization of people with AIDS. I mentioned in my book, a young man gets AIDS and a policeman drives down the street in his village with a megaphone and shouts out, "This man has AIDS and everyone in the town should know about it." And it shows that there's still a lot of superstition and ignorance about AIDS in this country, but it's gotten better and better.
And what are some of the problems of the sexual education in China?
Sexual education in China is what we call in English a train wreck. It is absolutely terrible. Sex education was mandated by the party in 1986. All students have to learn about it. But the teachers are so squeamish about it, some of them skip right over it, or if they do teach it, they only teach it in terms of physiology, of biology, nothing about sexual responsibility, nothing about contraception, nothing about a woman's right to refuse a sexual predator. It's getting better and better, but that isn't saying very much. And I think it's going to be many years before sex education in China really gives children a thorough understanding of what sex is.